The death toll continues to rise as Turkey is rocked by a 7.8 earthquake. That earthquake ripped through this country, and 7,100 people have been determined to have died as a result of this earthquake, and those numbers just keep rising. And the cold temperatures in that country are preventing search teams from finding additional people. We are monitoring what happens. Our prayers and thoughts go out to all the families who've lost their lives, and just hoping that those numbers level off and that more people aren't found dead as a result of this earthquake. We're also tracking in the news today this ongoing tension that's evolving between the U.S. and the Chinese over the U.S. shooting down that spy balloon that was spotted over the state of Montana. Some states like Texas are saying, look, the Chinese pose a risk to us, and we should not allow them to even purchase land in our state. That's what the governor of Texas is saying. Democrats in that state are pushing back, saying this is just anti-Chinese discrimination. Also, we're tracking the officers involved in the beating of Tyree Nichols. One of those officers, Demetrius Haley. This ex-officer, let me be clear about this. This ex-officer sent a photograph of Mr. Nichols as he took this picture on his personal cell phone as Mr. Nichols was sitting down, dying literally from this beating he had taken by these 5 officers. And this Haley guy took a picture of him and sent it out to 5 or 6 people, including a female acquaintance. So they're calling it a female acquaintance. Online, people are calling it some ex-girlfriend or baby mom or somebody. But the point is, what level of inhumanity must you have that you're taking a picture of someone who's been brutally beaten and sending it around? Not only is it a violation of police policy, it's just outright inhumane. We're also tracking the biggest news of the night, the State of the Union. It's happening right now. Joe Biden is giving his first State of the Union with a Congress that is controlled by Republicans. So you won't see Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris sitting behind the president as he gives the State of the Union. You'll see Vice President Harris sitting next to Kevin McCarthy, who is the leader of the House, because the Republicans have this very narrow majority. So we're going to be tracking throughout this hour what Joe Biden says and what he doesn't say during this State of the Union. We're also going to be talking in this hour about the guests. The guest list for the First Lady Jill Biden has been released, and there's some interesting people on that list. We're going to talk about what does it mean for you to be invited to the State of the Union. Why are certain people chosen to be guests of the First Lady? Does it tell us anything about what the president is going to talk about? And how did he choose some of the guests that are joining the First Lady in her box today? So we're going to be tracking all the news as it relates to the State of the Union, obviously tracking this horrific story that's happening in Turkey. You are listening to Areva Martin in real time. I'm your host, Areva Martin. And in this hour, post a comment. You can listen to the show. You can watch the show on YouTube. You can download the KBLA app, post a comment on our YouTube page, and we're going to take your questions. I am joined in this hour by veteran political analyst Robert Shrum. He has been around the block. Not that he's old, he's just super experienced. And I'm also joined later in the hour by a political comedian that's going to help us make sense of all the politics that's happening. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
There's one family, one day, $1, $1 at a time. KBLA Talk 1580 will be celebrating Black History Month Wealth with Lynn Richardson live on Wednesday, February 22nd at the Chase Community Center on Crenshaw and Vernon in Leimert Park. Come check out space. This location has been a bank branch for over 44 years and is now a community center. It provides resources and education to help the community with money goals, home ownership, and entrepreneurship. You and a guest can win lunch with Lynn Richardson February 22nd. Go to KBLA1580.com or the KBLA 1580 mobile app today and register. See you there.
Our Weekly Los Angeles is the largest audited Black newspaper in the state of California with a distribution of over 50,000 copies weekly. Pick up a copy every Thursday to get the latest news on African American communities of LA. You can also keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and surrounding cities by going to www.ourweekly.com. The Our Weekly website is updated daily with the current news about us and for us. For your advertising needs, Our Weekly offers economical advertising packages to fit your budget. Feel free to call Our Weekly Los Angeles at 323-905-1300 or visit the website at www.ourweekly.com. Our Weekly Los Angeles, reporting news that matters to you.
As a Walgreens pharmacist, I talk with people all the time about little tips and tricks for filling their Medicare prescriptions, like taking advantage of Walgreens 90-day refills to save them a trip, or using Refill by Scan, which is super easy and right on your phone. And for anybody worried about prescription costs, I say, hey, we got you with low-cost copays on many medications.
Let's talk about making things easier. Walgreens is here. Fill your way and save at walgreens.com/Medicare. See pharmacists for restrictions and exclusions.
The all-new Nissan Areva is a fully loaded EV. It's brimming with style and power.
Up to 389 horses of it.
Innovation and intelligence.
E-Force all-wheel drive.
It'll pin you to your seat.
Your very plush seat.
The all-new, all-electric Nissan Areva. Nissan Areva with E-Force expected availability early 2023. E-Force cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. E-Force and 389 horsepower available on Platinum Plus. Nissan calculation using 1-foot rollout testing with long-range battery. E-Force only in Port Mode with E-Step off. These results are for comparison only and should not be attempted on public roads. Drive responsibly. See nissanusa.com for details.
This is the second hour of Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin, and we are tracking all of the latest news today and bringing you updates. And of course, there is no bigger story than the State of the Union. Yes, this is President Joe Biden's second State of the Union, and it's going to look a little different this time. If you have a question, you have a comment, post it on our YouTube page, download the KBLA app, and join the conversation, because we have lots to talk about. I am joined in the second hour of the show my good friend, political analyst, Robert Shrum. He's the director over at USC Center for Political Future. He's been at this game a while. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here with you.
Presidents, Bob, tell us, without dating yourself, tell us how many presidents have you either worked for or, given commentary on? Just go. How far does your political career go back?
Well, it doesn't go back to George Washington. Really 1970, 71.
Okay. And who was president?
Nixon, and I certainly wasn't working for him.
Okay. But
I was George McGovern's speechwriter in the 1972 campaign.
Okay.
I was a kid, and, maybe, we had a campaign manager, Gary Hart, who was about 32. A pollster who was 21. So maybe that's why we lost 49 of 50 states. But I always say we didn't go to the White House, but at least we didn't go to jail.
Oh, okay. I like that. That's a good way to think about it. And you got all that incredible experience and you have been at this political game for a long time. So you're the person I want to talk to about what's happening tonight. Help us understand, how do we get to this point where the State of the Union is this big production? Because I was doing my research today, and historically, this wasn't the way the State of the Union was delivered. And technically, it doesn't have to be done this way. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president has to get on national television and have all this pomp and circumstance to deliver the State of the Union. So give us a little history lesson on the State of the Union.
Well, from Thomas Jefferson on, for the most part, the State of the Union was a document that was sent up to the Congress. President didn't get up and give a speech. Abraham Lincoln never delivered a State of the Union message in person. He just sent the paper up there. I think it's an inevitable product of the television age. Even when we started televising it, it was usually done at noon on the day that was selected. President Kennedy, for example, all of his State of the Union messages were delivered at noon. And then as things moved on, people said, let's put this in prime time. It's become, it gets a lot of criticism from people saying, it's old fashioned, it doesn't fit the 21st century. But at times it's been very important for presidents. It was very important for Bill Clinton in 1998 because he delivered it about 8 or 9 days after the revelations about Monica Lewinsky. And it was really a test of whether or not the Democrats, especially in Congress, were going to rally to him and whether he's going to be able to remain president of the United States. And he did a terrific job that night.
So you're saying this can be used as an opportunity to salvage a presidency. So Bill Clinton was in hot water, didn't know what was going to happen after those revelations came out about Monica Lewinsky. He comes out, he delivers an incredible speech. I'm thinking of a second time Bill Clinton, wasn't a State of the Union, but Bill Clinton, kind of saved Obama's second, that time when he was running for president the second time. So Bill Clinton has a history of giving these kind of, transformative speeches. Let's talk about historically. Give us some of your top State of the Union speeches and some of those that you think have bombed.
Well, President Kennedy's, and it wasn't technically a State of the Union. He asked to address the Congress with a kind of, in April of 1961. And that's, of course, one of the most memorable speeches because that's where he said, we're going to put a man on the moon in this decade and bring him safely back to Earth. Today, you wouldn't say man, you'd say person. But in the language of those days, it was a man on the moon. So I think of that. Franklin Roosevelt, his For Freedom speech was incredibly powerful, and that was done in the context of the State of the Union. George W. Bush, I wouldn't put it on my list of best, but I'd put it on my list of most memorable, advancing the case for war against Iraq, which was a disaster, and
Right.
Not the speech, but the war. But most of these are forgettable because they tend to be laundry lists. You got I've been involved in several of them, and you got every cabinet secretary, every official in the government saying, we got to get this line in, we got to get this line in, we have to put something in about this.
So help us
training
understand,
program.
Bob, that's something I didn't know. So you're great information. You're saying that the cabinet members play a role in what goes in the State of the Union. They're kind of lobbying the White House staff to get their issue included.
Yes, and very often they succeed. They don't all succeed all the time, or the speech would probably be 2 or 2.5 hours long. It would, rival one that Fidel Castro would have given. But so they can become forgettable because they can just be laundry lists, but they can also set a tone. And I think that's what you're going to see tonight. I think you're going to see Joe Biden is going to have an overall message. My bet is it's going to be not just we've done a lot, but it is going to be we've done a lot, but we have a lot more to do. And he's going to hold out an olive branch and say, let's try and do these things together. Now, do I have much hope that the Republicans will respond to that and in a bipartisan way? No, because right now what they want more than anything else is for this presidency to fail. And Biden's in a very interesting situation because he has the most successful legislative record of any president in a 2-year period in 6 decades. But at the same time, the effects of that legislation haven't yet been felt by the American people. So people still say we're on the wrong track.
Right.
His approval rating is, depending on what you believe, 42, 45, something like that. And I remind people, because sometimes we lack a sense of history in having these discussions. At this point in 1983, Ronald Reagan's approval rating was 38%. He went less than 2 years later, he won re-election by carrying 59 states. That's not possible in today's world because we're so polarized. But as these programs roll out, the
infrastructure,
bipartisan
all that money,
the infrastructure,
states,
manufacturing comes back. We begin to build our own chips here in America, or manufacture our own chips. All of that's going to have an impact. And if inflation continues to go down, I'm amused today, by the way, the Republicans are tweeting out like crazy about gas prices. gas prices are coming down. They have come down. And
I
somebody
think,
else
Bob, what I noticed is they came down and they start to creep back up a little, and hopefully they're going back down again. But clearly Biden cannot be blamed, and that's, again, just irritates me when people try to blame Biden for inflation. You know, it's a global issue that impacts the entire world, not just the U.S. I do want to ask you, though, Bob, about this guest list. I happened to get invited to participate in a briefing earlier today. So we got to hear about the speech, and we know it's going to be, as you said, progress and possibilities. But we also got to talk a little about the guests. And I got the whole guest list, and when you look at the guests that Jill Biden has invited, before I tell you some of the names and ask you why are they on this list, tell us historically how that came about. Like, why these guests? Why is that such a big deal?
Well, I don't know whether or not it was the origin of the idea, but in his speech at the 1980 Democratic Convention, toward the end, Senator Ted Kennedy talked about the people, and in many cases using their names, that he had met around the country and what he had learned from them and what they meant. And then after we had the plane crash in Washington, I think it was in 1982, and a guy named Lenny Skutnik went into a frozen Potomac River and helped to rescue people. President Reagan invited him to the State of the Union. And since then, it's been a kind of standard trope. You've had people there who exemplify issues you care about, issues you're going to talk about, or places in the speech where you'll say something and the directors for the networks will know, turn the camera on this person in the First Lady's box.
Yeah, looking at this list, some interesting characters. The lead singer of U2, Bono, is going to be in that box tonight. Is that a weird choice for the president and First Lady?
I don't think so. He's been very involved in AIDS in Africa and in combating AIDS in Africa. President may refer to that. I don't know. I haven't seen the speech, obviously. But you know, and they like each other. I mean,
that's a good reason.
Yeah, that's another good reason. But I think that there will be, in some way, there may be some reference that involves him.
Well, this one is very clearly a part of the political agenda of Joe Biden, and that's the ambassador of Ukraine. We know that the Democrats are bracing for a fight with Republicans about aid to the Ukraine. What do you think the president is going to say about Ukraine in this speech? And clearly, I know he's going to recognize the ambassador that's joining the First Lady.
Well, I want to be fair, by the way, because a lot of Senate Republicans support the president on this and support the idea that we have to help Ukraine. And the truth of the matter is that the House Republicans who are against this are going to scream and yell and make a lot of noise, and they're not going to get aid to Ukraine cut off. It's not going to happen. There are even enough Republicans in the House who, joining with the Democrats, will see that we do pass aid to Ukraine and do what we have to do. I think he'll say that it was a war of aggression by the Russians, that the Ukrainians have been unbelievably brave and bold in defending their country, and that it's a test of NATO and of the free world and of our own fundamental values to stand with these folks, not for us to get in a war with Russia, but to stand by and help people who've been invaded by Russia.
Yeah, there's also a cancer survivor. We know cancer is really important to Joe Biden. So he has a woman named Daphne Gaffney. She's from North Charleston, South Carolina. She's diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. So she's a cancer survivor. Does Biden go back to cancer because of his son, Bo? Is that why you think that Darlene?
It's very personal to him. The cancer moonshot, the phrase he has for it, is something that I would be surprised if he didn't mention tonight. You know, if in the history of State of the Union messages, in one of Richard Nixon's, he called for a massive investment to prevent and cure cancer. this has been a long struggle. And by the way, we've come a long way in 50 or 60 years in terms of how we deal with cancer and in the survival rate, not for all cancers. I mean, the cancer Beau Biden had, the same cancer that Ted Kennedy had, is pretty much totally incurable. I mean, there may be 1 or 2 people who've survived, but it's pretty much totally incurable. So I think this is personal to the president. I think he'll mention it. And by the way, it's personal to tens of millions of Americans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the parents of Tyree Nichols, they are in the First Lady's box as well. We know that from this briefing, police reform is a big issue for the president. How does he navigate these waters, though, Bob? You know, we went down the defund the police. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about that, and Democrats, some thought it was a great way to approach reforming police. Others thought it was, you know, deadly for certain Democrats who are running in more conservative districts. How does the president thread this needle around police reform, particularly with the parents of Tyree Nichols sitting in that box?
Well, first, Areva, I want to say I wish the parents of Tyree Nichols weren't in that box. I wish they were home with their son.
Absolutely.
And this is something that has had a searing impact, I think, on the conscience of most Americans. You know, so did George Floyd. But this was not one police officer or 2 or 3. This was a whole cadre of them. And as you said earlier, you know, sending pictures out of a bruised, beaten, and dying man. I mean, it's inhuman. On the substance of the issue, it's going to be very tough to get things done. I just have to be honest. Even Tim Scott, the Republican senator from South Carolina who tried to negotiate with Democrats on this, for example, is opposed to anything that touches qualified immunity, which is what protects so many police officers, even in cases of misconduct.
Yeah, that's a big part of that George Floyd and policing bill that has been stalled and now would have to be reintroduced and probably wouldn't make it in this Congress, I would think.
You know, I think there's a chance it could make it through the Senate. I think there'd be a lot of party discipline in the House to block it. And you do have to, in the Senate now, you'd have to get 9 Republicans to be for it, assuming that you would hold Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema voting with you. But this is a fight that's going to have to go on for a while. You know, if you think back to Little Rock in 1957, you know, it was 8 years later that the Civil Rights Act finally passed. You know, this is going to be a real struggle, and it's going to take a while. But it's something that has to be done.
That the civil rights, the good news is that the activists and the advocates, they understand, they're in it for the long run, and they understand that, you know, passing major pieces of legislation like police reform and changing the culture, not just the legislation, because what we saw with, you know, the unfortunate, the intentional and unfortunate murder of Tyree Nichols is the culture of policing has to change. And we know legislation can't change the culture. Before I run out of time, I do want to ask you, Bob, all this talk about replacing Kamala Harris on the ticket, who's floating these press releases? Because somebody's out, you know, quickly typing up press releases and sending them out to the media. There's no chance in hell that Joe Biden is going to replace Kamala Harris. But why all the hoopla about that?
You know, it goes with the job, and to some extent, you know, vice presidents can always, people can say, what are they doing? You know, they're not living up to expectations, not helping the president enough. I suspect some of her rivals, or at least people who support her rivals, are doing this. Most of them don't put their names to it.
There are always these anonymous people that say they want to replace the vice president, or these anonymous people don't want Joe Biden. And of course, the reporters say, well, we can't reveal our sources. So we never get to know who these so-called, you know, party loyalists, because they'll say even the Democratic Party loyalists even want to replace it.
Or they'll say a strategist, there are a couple people, to be fair, who have put their names to these comments. There's a lawyer named Morgan in Florida who has been a big Democratic fundraiser, who's been quite overt about saying this. Kamala Harris is not going to be replaced on the ticket.
No.
She's Joe Biden, in my view, assuming that we have a good economy, inflation is under control, and he's in good health, is going to run and is going to get reelected, and she's going to get reelected.
Yeah, I guess you saw that poll. I'm sure you saw it, the ABC poll that put Biden and Trump in a 1-to-1, and it had Trump actually winning. Again, I don't put a lot of faith in these polls. We know these polls had us celebrating Hillary Clinton's victory. That didn't happen. But what did you make of that? Even if there's a poll out there that suggests that Donald Trump beats Biden in a head-to-head matchup.
I don't believe that poll, and nor do most Republican strategists who will talk to you privately and say what they think. Governor Chris Sununu, a Republican in New Hampshire, said it overtly this weekend that Donald Trump couldn't win. Chris Christie has said basically the same thing. I agree with that. I mean, all you have to do is look at what happened to Trump candidates like Carrie Lake and Laxalt in Nevada, who was running for the Senate. Carrie Lake in Arizona is still running around saying she's going to be sworn in someday.
Yeah, she tried
voters,
to file a lawsuit.
Yeah,
that went nowhere.
Well, the lawsuit's still there. I mean, but the voters rejected this kind of stuff, so that you had a lot of Republicans down ballot winning in Arizona, but you had a lot of them not voting for her, either skipping the race or actually voting for the Democrat Katie Hobbs. So I think all the indications are Trump's lost 3 elections in a row, 2018, 2020, and 2022, where he was the dominant issue in many ways. Yeah. And he's, and the Republicans had the worst performance that you can possibly have, or not possibly, that you can have in a midterm historically.
Right.
And the Democrats had the best performance that they've had since 1962 and JFK in his first term in a midterm election.
Well, you heard it from Bob Schramm, veteran political analyst, goes all the way back to the 1970s when Ronald Reagan was president. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden will remain the Democratic president and vice president candidates. They are going to win. They're going to beat Donald Trump. So you got it from the horse's mouth. Thank you so much, Bob. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Be well. After
you too, and I hope
sports.
You too, and I hope I'm right.
Okay, after some news, traffic, and sports, we're going to continue this conversation with political comedian Joey Novik. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin, and we are tracking the biggest news story of the day. And there is no story bigger than the State of the Union about to take place about 15 minutes or so. So this is your pre-State of the Union coverage. We've been talking to Bob Schramm. We had Congress member Robert Garcia on. We had LA Times columnist and a professor from University of Central Florida. Now we're going to have some fun. My friend, lawyer, political commentator, and most importantly, a political comedian, Joey Novick, is in the house to help us, just relax and de-stress and get ready to watch the State of the Union with just a very calm state of mind.
Just
Welcome,
breathe,
Joey, and thank
just
you.
breathe with me. Inhale, exhale, and we'll be calm. Yeah, hey, thank you for having me on. It was very interesting predictions by Mr. Schramm, and I heard him say, this is what we're saying, we're off the air, is that he predicts that in 2024, the vice president and president will run again, and they will win.
Yes.
Despite the poll. I have to vehemently disagree with the gentleman. I really do think that there's going to be a bit of a struggle in the Democratic Party. And partially, I think it'll be an unfair, because of Joe, we're talking about somebody who would be 81 running for president. And I have to say that I never really thought I would live in a world where there would be presidents older than me. I mean, I think Joe Biden's doing a great job, but
Let's talk about that, Joey.
Yeah.
Now, is this ageism? Are you saying that Joe Biden, just because he'll be in his 80s, should not be the president of the United States, even if he still has all of his faculties, even if he's sharp, if he can still do the job?
I do believe that if he ran for president, I would certainly vote for him. I'm a longtime Democrat. I would certainly vote for him and the vice president once again. The things that he has in his favor to run, he's going to talk tonight about wanting to establish a billionaires tax, which I don't think that won't get out of the starting gate with the current, Congress being run by the Republicans. But I do think that just the general understanding of someone who was 80, 81, 82 years old, I just don't think that that person would be able to win enough of the votes of very important states to win. And I think that there will be a significant number of Democrats who will feel the same way and believe that, he did the job that he was supposed to do, which is beat Donald Trump. He beat Donald Trump, get the presidency back for the Democrats, and it's time to have him move on. Again, I'm a big fan of Joe Biden.
You forget that old white men have a special place in this country. That's why Joe Biden is the president today, is because we're like, old white man Trump is running. We need to get us another old white man to run against that old white man. It's like your doctor and your priest, you just revere them. So I think there's a lot of folks who think, hey, the old dude
Areva,
is probably our best bet.
I've thought about it. I accept your nomination. I will see what I can do. I'll see what my schedule looks like in running. No, it's very true what you say. There are a lot of very good Democrats that are out there, and I think that Joe Biden running again. I mean, if the election is actually Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, that would really surprise me. I think that you're not going to have either. I think what it comes down to, I don't think either Joe Biden or Donald Trump will actually be the two candidates running for their
Well, I hear your prediction, and we're going to have to wait to 2024 to figure that out. But let's talk about some important stuff, like the motorcade that's driving up. So we're getting blow by blow what's happening. And we know the motorcade has pulled up. And George Santos, what do you make of him? He's mulling around. He's invited as his guest. Each congressperson gets a guest. His guest is a Democrat that actually ran for his seat, who's pretty controversial himself. Now, this guy said that he was at 9/11, but he was a fireman. He says he was there. His captain or former captain says, no, you were not there. But apparently he has a photo of himself. And we know that George Santos said his mother was in a building on 9/11 and that, she perished in that building. We know that's not true. His mother wasn't there. His mother was a maid. She was not a financial service worker. So talk to us about George Santos.
I will tell you, I've been doing stand-up comedy, I guess about 23, 24 years. And I've done a lot of political comedy over the years. There are some things, there are some people, there are some incidents that just simply write themselves. They write the jokes for you. And that's what George Santos has done. I mean, the idea that he was able to just fluff on his resume, it's like he was applying for a job at McDonald's and just put on his resume all of these things, that he was the manager, that he did this, he cured cancer, he negotiated a peace treaty at the end of the Vietnam War, he was formerly the president of the United States. It's like he could put anything on his resume. And in his district, which the district is cut Republican, so no matter who won that primary, the Republican was likely to win. I think the Republicans should be a lot more angry at him than the Democrats are for allowing him to run and win in a primary like that.
Well, the Republicans are pretty pissed off, and many of those Republicans in New York, which is the state he's representing,
yes,
have called for him to resign. He's been steadfast in not resigning, but he's pretty isolated. He's mulling around, oftentimes in the Capitol without anyone to talk to him. No one wants to be seated next to him because they're fearful that when Saturday Night Live does their parody of Santos, that they're going to somehow be attacked as well, or be the subject of, comics like yourself.
See, if I were him, what I would do is I would resign and then show up the next day anyway. Just like he lied about resigning, just show up anyway and just lied that you ever resigned. I think that would be a very good thing for him to do. Just do that a couple of times. And I think that they would just get exhausted entirely and say, look, just let him stay. We just won't pay any attention to him. Just let him sit there.
Well, yeah, we're going to be watching George Santos throughout the night. And some people, Joey, are just watching the State of the Union, not really to hear what Joe Biden has to say. They'll catch that on social media tomorrow. They're just watching to see who heckles, who stands up, who claps, who makes faces, who falls asleep. What are you going to be watching for?
I'll actually, look, I take this kind of seriously. I like to hear what the president has to say. I think what you're going to see is him tout some very important things on a serious level. The very lowest unemployment rate in more than 50 years is definitely his doing. Democrats did fine in the midterm. There was supposed to be a red wave, and there was barely even a pink trickle. There was nothing. Democrats picked up seats in the Senate. And then there was this election where McCarthy, they had to elect McCarthy. They had to have 15 votes, 16 votes to finally become the Speaker of the House. I think that he will actually have a very optimistic tone in his State of the Union address. And there's going to be a couple of things that he will talk about that are the negatives. You haven't heard him talk about, immigration or, the so-called border crisis. Inflation is very high. So I think you'll hear him kind of downplay the negative, uptick all the positives, and it'll be a pretty predictable speech along those lines.
Yeah, I am going to be watching to see what Kevin McCarthy does. He's finally wrestled that gavel out of the hands of the Democrats, so it's going to be interesting. We are hearing that Ilhan Omar is not dressed in white. That was a big theme for women, congresswomen last year. When we come forward with Joey, I want to talk about some other characters that we can expect to see make their way to the comic circuit, other political characters. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin, and we are tracking today's biggest news. I'm also, obviously, that's the State of the Union, which is taking place in about 8 minutes. Joe Biden will give his second State of the Union, this time, unlike the last State of the Union, where there was a Democratic-controlled House. This will be his first State of the Union with the Republicans actually in control. So you'll see Vice President Kamala Harris and Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, sitting behind Joe Biden. We're going to be watching for all of the reactions from the Republicans. We know that they're going to follow the lead of the Speaker. So we're going to see how many times Kevin McCarthy actually stands up, how many times he claps. We're going to see if he makes a bunch of frowns. We're just going to check what's happening with him. But I also want to give you an update on this horrific situation happening in Turkey. 8,000 people now have died as a result of this
earthquake,
7.8 earthquake that ripped through this country Monday morning. Rescue efforts are being delayed because of freezing cold temperatures. We continue to pray for those families. We continue to pray that more people survive and that this death toll doesn't continue to rise. When I first started checking it, it was around 5,000. Now there are 8,000 people who are reported to have died as a result of this earthquake. So again, prayers with those families. Joining me in this last segment is lawyer, comedian, political comedian, Jovi Novick, and we're talking about the fodder that all the characters that comedians like you get to use in your stand-up acts. We know George Santos must be big. Who are some of the other political figures that if we are at a local comedy club, we're likely to hear, comics making fun of, actually?
Well, before we begin, I just want to echo your thoughts and prayers for those families in the Turkey area. I know that certainly they are under a great deal of pressure, and I wish them well, and I hope that the rescue efforts do succeed there. So I just want to make sure that I mention that. Certainly, some of the characters that we have today that comedians make fun of on a regular basis. Certainly, if I had to give a top 10 list or a four faces on a mountain, certainly one would be Trump, one would be Mitch McConnell. Certainly, Kevin McCarthy has risen to that level. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, certainly are all on that same list. And certainly on the Democratic side, I mean, I've certainly poked fun at Joe Biden myself, and Nancy Pelosi certainly is open for that. Continuing with people like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton very much on the in the list of anybody who wants to make fun. Also, not too far off, the three members of the Supreme Court, all appointed by Donald Trump, very conservative. They certainly are, just very, very important to stand-up comedians because of the nature of their politics. So all of those and more.
Well, no shortage of political characters. No. We're going to be watching. I'm sure there's going to be some new folks that emerge from this State of the Union. There are going to be memes all over social media tomorrow. There will be sound bites, and we'll get all kinds of faces. Those cameras do such a great job of capturing people in real time,
right?
And their real-time expressions. Thank you so much, Joey, for joining me. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for helping us find some levity in what is such a partisan world that we live in.
I am
always
going
a pleasure to see you, my friend.
I'm going to be doing a frown count. I'll watch Kevin McCarthy and count how many times he frowns, and I will text you the frown count at the end of my watching. Thank you for having me on.
I will be looking for the frown count. I'm going to be watching very closely what happens with this State of the Union. Important topics, obviously, the family of Tyre Nichols, his mother and his stepfather in that box. I can't even imagine having to participate in an event like this after having put your son to rest, having to lay your son to rest. and having to watch those horrific videos over and over again.
Sure.
But so much courage and so much,
Yeah,
just, class that this family has shown. I'm so incredibly proud of them. Also, I'm going to be watching Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of these other folks who have a history of heckling the president. Some of these people who are, characters in and of themselves. Going to watch to see what their reactions are. And also, I'm going to be watching Hakeem Jeffries. This is the first time he will be sitting in the Capitol at the State of the Union as the minority leader.
Sure.
He has a vested interest in making sure that in 2024, he's no longer the minority leader, but that he becomes the majority leader. And we'll be watching Nancy Pelosi because this is going to be the first time in a long time that she wasn't sitting in the Capitol as the majority or minority leader, to make sure that she doesn't upstage Hakeem. This is Hakeem's moment. This is, his time to shine. So I'm going to be watching reactions from all of not just the Republicans, but those Democratic leaders as well. Lots to see, lots to talk about. Tomorrow we'll, of course, unpack everything that happens in the State of the Union tonight. You make sure you join us, Areva Martin in Real Time. We will be keeping it real in real time, bringing you the latest news stories, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. The next voice that you hear will be Les Brown. Les is doing a radio residency at KBLA for the entire month of February. He is the nation's motivator extraordinaire, and his show is You Got to Be Hungry with Les Brown. News, traffic, and sports, and Les Brown on KBLA Talk 1580.